But at the core, CX is probably a human psychology thing. How do we understand that?
When elevators were introduced in the 1880s to carry people in high-rise buildings, well, maybe two or three things happened. The first one is that the perception of the ride on the elevator was that the elevator ride was boring and slow, but it's difficult to express it that way. And so the majority of residents would just complain and say the elevator is slow, and we want faster elevators. Now, it might come almost intuitively to say, okay, let's dial it up, let's speed it up a little bit, pump the engine and make them go faster. But the truth is, first of all, there's no correct speed, right? If you accelerate it a little bit, after a couple of weeks, your residents would probably complain again because they just now got used to the new speed and it's not enough. The second thing you could do is, you could think is that those old elevators probably didn't feel very safe. So if you ride an old elevator, one of those cage ones maybe, and they go really fast, it's scary in a different way.
Yeah.
And so the story is relatively famous by now. So the true innovation that was introduced there is nothing new, really. It's just an application of something that already existed. And so it was give the passengers, the riders on the elevator, something interesting to look at. And that's a mirror. So they just installed mirrors. And so people get distracted by the presence of a mirror and they do not focus on the ride itself. And so they don't complain about it anymore. So as you said, the solution is it's not an elevator issue. It's a ride experience issue that could be improved with a mirror.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of CX with Chopra, where we talk about everything customer experience. And today I'm thrilled to introduce Mr. Alessandro Lanteri, who's a professor of strategy at innovation at ESCP Business School, which is, I believe, the oldest and one of the best in the world. He's also written a Amazon best-selling book, Clever. If you haven't, I'm sure by the end of the podcast you would want to go and right away order it. He is a distinguished thought leader in strategy and innovation, extensive experience across various industries, and I read you wrote that one of your students has written that Lanteri is dope. So and I've personally, he's taught strategy to me as well personally. So I think he's the Tony Stark of strategy. So really excited, and to begin with, we talk about customer experience. We talk about how digital transformation, whichever, that wave has happened. People have been talking about digital transformation for the last 20 years. Now is the transformation of CX, where everybody is not looking, because now companies are no longer competing with their own industry. It's probably they're competing with whichever brand is out there in terms of CX. And because the customer expectations are also increasing. And if I talk about, one very interesting point where, I want to start the conversation with is that CX at the core is art of perception. That it's more of, the perception which is built from messaging, the brand would give, interaction with your product services or interaction with employees or after sales, all that cumulative effect, the perception that builds up about a brand, that builds up the CX, the impact of CX. And what I was also reading is that one of the topmost things for brands these days is how do we manage those perceptions? Because sometimes the memory of the experience is more important than the experience itself.
I love what you're saying. There are at least 12 different key points you already mentioned. So I'm going to selectively cherry pick a couple, but please bring them back because these are very exciting topics. I would love to go deeper.
Yeah, sure.
Let me maybe say one thing that's very, very close to my heart. So as you said, I teach for ESCP Business School. We are indeed the oldest business school in the world, 200 plus years old. And we are top ranked in many international rankings. We are top 5. And yet not everybody knows, right? Many people don't even know that we exist. No one wakes up in the morning and thinks about Googling what's the oldest business school in the world. That doesn't really matter. There are indeed schools like Harvard Business School, which is not even ranked. And yet the brand of this school, right? It's powerful enough to keep attracting uh, you know, candidates, students, partners, companies, you name it. So I think that
Hmm.
that's a very important distinction you already made. There is one distinct level of objective quality, or third party validated. Let's put it this way, which are the rankings, and the other one is what people know and think, and that's really, as you said, a matter of perception. I'll stop
Hmm.
here for a sec, but otherwise
Very
I can talk for the whole time. But I
interesting
want
what
to
you.
have a conversation.
Interesting because as they say, you should be rich and infamous rather than poor and famous.
As an
Yeah.
individual, surely I would rather.
Yeah, it's like, in the niche market, you should probably be the leader. If somebody who's not a relevant target audience, it's okay if don't even know about it. I mean, yeah. So very interesting. But then coming to, the whole managing perceptions, because oftentimes, because I remember you had given an example and would love to talk about the whole elevator example as well, because
Sure.
the solution probably lies somewhere else. You know,
Indeed, indeed. So there is this very famous story of the elevator. If you don't mind, I'll just say
I
it. So
would
for
love
the
to. Yeah,
audience who
please.
hasn't heard it, maybe a couple of them. But when elevators were introduced in the 1880s to carry people in high-rise buildings, well, maybe two or three things happened. The first one is that the perception of the ride on the elevator was that the elevator ride was boring and slow, but it's difficult to express it that way. And so the majority of residents would just complain and say the elevator is low
Hmm.
and we want faster elevators. Now, it might come almost intuitively to say, okay, let's dial it up, like let's speed it up a little bit,
Right.
pump the engine and make them go faster. But the truth is, first of all, there's no correct speed, right? If you accelerate it a little bit, after a couple of weeks, your residents would probably complain again because they just now got used to the new speed and it's not enough.
Hmm.
The second thing you could do is, you could think is that those old elevators probably didn't feel very safe. So if you ride an old elevator, one of those cage ones maybe,
Go in the
and they go
grill.
really fast,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
scary in a different way.
Yeah.
And so the story is relatively famous by now. So the true innovation that was introduced there is nothing new, really. It's just an application of something that already existed. And so it was give the passengers, the riders on the elevator, something interesting to look at, and that's a mirror. So they just installed mirrors, and so people get distracted by the presence of a mirror, and they do not focus on the ride itself, and so they don't complain about it anymore.
Hmm.
So as you said, the solution is it's not an elevator issue. It's
Hmm.
a ride experience issue that could be improved with a mirror.
Hmm.
And to this day, if you look at it, elevators and waiting areas
Everywhere.
still have a mirror or a digital screen nowadays. But the principle is precisely the same. Just to give something that takes you off the thought that you are there doing nothing, which is
Interesting.
really not an elevator problem.
Interesting, because when we look at, CX, if you hear, some of the leaders talk about CX, and we're going to talk about the future of CX for sure. People look at technology, AI. I'm sure, and we're going to obviously talk about AI.
Yeah,
I think we can't miss AI in any conversation now. But at the core, CX is probably a human psychology thing. How do we understand that, and how do we then focus on, I mean, yes, looking at data, we talk about that in terms of how
yeah,
can we preempt certain things, but it's more about human psychology. I mean, like you're saying, even now, if I recall, in Disney theme parks, I mean, you probably spend 30% of your day just waiting in lines.
yeah,
You're not taking rides. 30% of your day. I mean, if you're there for the whole day, probably 3 hours at least
yeah.
you're waiting in lines. But the whole experience, like they've made, there are big screens out there. You keep looking at the screen, something or the other is happening, or there's a road show happening, which keeps you busy, which doesn't make you feel that you're just standing and waiting. Which is, again, they're probably solving a CX problem. Otherwise, probably end of the day, I would have been frustrated. I was just waiting for 3 hours.
I think that's absolutely right. There's one thing that I would like to mention, maybe if that's all right. I don't want to change subject too much because
Mhm.
this is still a very important angle to pursue. But one thing that I notice, and I take a very, very personal perspective on this, as an educator and
Hmm.
as a faculty in a business school, I think that we need to be extremely careful who do we call a C or a customer. Now, we need to give everybody a good experience, which is a challenge, but not everybody is a customer, and who you call a customer changes your soul, if I can go as far as that. I taught for a few business schools in my career, and I have short collaborations with some of them. And it's not unheard of. It's actually fairly common to hear your students are your customers. But if
Mm.
you start framing them as your customers, all sorts of wrong things start happening, right?
Right.
uh, my job as an educator is not to please my students.
Mm.
Definitely not to please them in the short run. There is a concept of the student that I love. My student is my product. Now, I still need to give them a pleasant enough experience where they perceive value, but I do not need them to go home every day with a big smile thinking, oh, this is so
Yeah.
easy, right? Otherwise, you compromise both the long-term viability of your brand and your identity, and also what you give the students starts losing meaning. If anybody, any student just shows up and gets an A because that's how we keep customers happy, that destroys the institution.
And also coming to the human psychology in terms of building the managing perceptions. Also want to talk about that. Is are you also Do you also foresee that brands using gamification
Hmm.
as part of the whole purchase, let's say, is also somewhere to help manage some of those
Yeah.
perceptions, or it's just entertainment? Or
No, it does, because so gamification has a few elements, right? One of them is the entertainment part, but the second one is the build up of a scoring system or
hmm,
achieving the next level. So becoming more of a client, more loyal of a client, more distinguished client. So airlines have been doing this very well with their loyalty miles in a way.
hmm,
There are different approaches to this. Video games, of course, have done it very well, but even educational institutions that give you micro credentials that then build up into more credits and then eventually a degree. So you can do a number of things with the gamification. And I think what comes to mind, right? The first thing that you highlighted is you are building a buy-in
hmm,
that changes a little bit your self-identity. You're not just buying something; you are also doing something with the company. You're becoming some a
part of the
different level of customer,
hmm,
and that changes your self-identity. So you're not just transacting; you feel better about yourself, or you feel
hmm,
more satisfied. I think that's a very big point for many companies.
hmm.
There are other companies which are, and I'm sorry if I keep going back to my industry. I just
Please,
find it
please, yeah, yeah.
unique, right? So maybe I'll say this in a moment. But there are some companies uh, like luxury brands
Hmm,
where being a customer is almost considered an achievement.
hmm.
I
Right.
will not
Great.
say the nation because I don't want to give away anything,
Hmm,
and I will not say who told me, but someone I know who is a psychologist and works with very, very wealthy individuals. Um, and I don't know who these individuals are because obviously this psychologist didn't tell me. Um, so she told it's a so the psychologist is a
hmm,
woman. She told me that some of her clients uh, experience dramatic episodes of anxiety when they fail to purchase unique items from top brands,
hmm,
compounded by the fact that maybe someone in their social circle did get it. And so we're talking about handbags that cost upwards of 50,000 US
right.
dollars, and say, okay, I have $50,000 here. Give me the bag. No, I'm not going to give it to you. But I bought one before. It doesn't matter. The other guy bought three. So I'm going to give it to them first. And so they create these dynamics which are eventually even a bit
Hmm,
self-destructive. But you'll see that so changing the perception of you as a transactional customer into
hmm,
someone who has a big investment in the brand. Ferrari has been doing this for a while.
hmm.
Now there are a few rappers who are banned from ever owning a Ferrari again because of the mods they did that were disrespectful to the
Hmm.
legacy of the brand. So it's really a
Interesting.
huge psychological dimension. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
I agree with you completely there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because another angle is also that in gamification, if I look at the core principle, probably, I mean, that's what I want to probably validate with you
Mm.
rather, is you want to give that little sense of achievement to people. Now, if I
Mhm.
apply the same principle, let's say if I go to the store, I just my sense of achievement is I was able to find a nice shirt, let's say, which I really like, and coming out, I'm holding handbags. So which is like a sense of achievement. I did achieve something.
Mhm.
But and cut to an online e-commerce, that experience is taken away to a certain extent.
That's right. Yeah.
So do you think that brands, and I've seen it, because when I look at, coming in from an analytics background, we start to come up with, what are those opportunity areas, where are the people dropping off, and then we realize that it's more to do with giving that micro sense of achievement. Even if you
Mm,
add a product to the card, let's say a pop-up cake, a product added to the card,
mm,
that's a micro achievement, that I did something, I achieved
sure,
something, this
sure.
way, if because the whole checkout process is going to be lengthy in a way.
You're very. Yeah, it's a very interesting way to say it. In general, this is definitely true for me as a professional and as a customer. That if something comes too easy, it gives very little satisfaction or no satisfaction. And
Hmm.
so there are a few things that you can do when I buy online, as you said, for example, to give me a different kind of engagement. Um, One of them is making me feel part of some sort of community or be like other individuals. So you could recommend complementary products or related products that people like me have purchased. As you said, you can give small validation every time I click on something. There
Hmm.
is a bit of a confirmation that I've accomplished that much. Um, I, I've noticed this for some brands. I'm not a huge online shopper myself, but for some brands, I noticed post COVID, probably it was there before, that the investment and emphasis on the packaging has become such that even I notice it. Let's put it this way. Whereas before, it was a cardboard box with your
Hmm.
product in it. Um, Now there are brands that convey that a bit more.
Because
Um,
sorry, go on.
there's one more thing that I find a little bit. I mean, it doesn't work for me specifically, but I understand where it's coming from. So there's a few brands that I'm a customer of,
Hmm.
who really go the extra mile, reminding me of a special offer or something that works specifically for me, or even my birthday.
Hmm.
I can imagine why they remind me it's my birthday is coming up because they think maybe he wants to buy himself a nice present.
Yeah.
But still, they go the extra mile. So they don't just send an email. Someone types a WhatsApp for me, and I think that this is really a big effort in making you feel valued. And maybe it's not only about being feel valued. Maybe they really think I'm valuable, right? It
Or at
doesn't
least
work for
that's
me,
the
but
perception.
that definitely that's a perception, yeah. And as I said, it doesn't necessarily work for me as an individual, but the concept is quite powerful.
But I think it's also, do you also think it's probably because of the whole post pandemic, the whole digitization which has happened now? I mean, yes, I think people have gone back to stores. They always wanted to go back to stores.
Yeah,
But in a store, you can still control the entire CX,
yeah,
because I mean, you still have the opportunity to tap into all the senses, most of the senses. What I see, what I feel, what I smell, what music is being
yeah.
played, how that the staff is talking to me, how the products are displayed. It's that, at least that experience can be or created, crafted, as compared to online. Everybody is just focusing on conversion rate optimization. I mean, everybody is just trying
Yeah.
to be like Google in terms of creating more white spaces, single click checkout. I mean, it's the whole differentiator is probably becoming very less. So maybe
Yeah.
it's because of out of that necessity, that they have to focus on packaging, they have to focus on personalization, they have to look at how do they go to that extra mile just to get differentiated from million other brands which are out there.
You're right. You're right. I think one thing is that the same products are now available online by
Yeah.
dozens of merchants, right? So before there was less of this availability. The other thing is that a lot of e-commerce is a game of numbers
Hmm.
by necessity and by efficiency as well. So I respect that. But some brands would lose big time if they go too much in that direction. There are two anecdotes I've heard from other people that really changed my understanding of e-commerce. Because I'm old, as you can tell, I have white hair. But these two stories. So one of them was just before COVID, actually, um, and this gentleman told me that he was doing helping his son do homework or something. His son was 9 or 10, and the homework was about talk about your favorite shop and why do you like it and what do you like doing there and so on. And this kid said, my favorite shop is the Apple Store.
Hmm.
And that's something that would never have occurred to me to even call that a shop, right? It doesn't come naturally to me
Hmm.
that e-commerce is a shop, but that's an experience for a generation that's growing.
Interesting.
And the second story I heard from a participant in one of my trainings immediately after COVID, who was a mother, and she had a son who, by the time she did the training with me, maybe was three, probably something like that. So she told me that once he took the son to the grocery store, to a supermarket, and the child stopped. He didn't want to enter. He didn't know what the place was. And he said, Mom, what is this place? And she said, This is where we buy groceries and food. He said, but I thought that food came to our door. So for him, the only shopping experience he had ever experienced because of COVID was someone delivering it to your door. And
Right.
so the fact that we have a legacy of going to physical stores and describing the experience in a certain way,
Yeah.
uh, it's a little bit of, path dependent. It's how you've learned how to shop.
Hmm.
I think that there are new generations, particularly in certain countries of the world, right? Half of the world still doesn't have electricity, so that's a different story. But for those of us who have access to these new um,
Hmm.
distribution systems, I think that for many of us, especially, let's say, our kids, going to the store and having a shopping experience will be completely different than what they were for us, for me.
Or they'll be talking about that it's a new experience. Going to a store,
Yeah,
I mean, probably 10
probably,
years
yes.
down the line in podcast, they'll be talking about that. I went to a store, by the way. This is how
Yes,
it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
You wouldn't believe how many useless things are there.
Yeah. And there was a person standing to ask me what I want. But you're right, because it's a big challenge for brands as well to target Gen Alphas now, because
Yeah, yeah,
they've never not had the internet. They were born with it. I remember
agree.
one of my friend's kid was standing in front of the TV and swiping it. He thought even this, you swiping a television would change the channel, because for them, that's the experience, that they've been born with.
Yeah,
So
that's how you interact with the screen, right? That's yeah,
it's going to be very interesting. And then coming, slightly shifting to another point, that because talking about CX now, brands focus a lot, like you were saying about the whole packaging, the whole personalization, and we're going to talk about data, AI, all of that, because brands are not want to shift the focus beyond probably product and price. Because in product and
yeah,
price, it's probably red ocean. Probably where they can achieve their
yeah,
blue ocean is could be, how they can have CX at the core. That CX at the core, for example, Netflix, it was the whole hyper personalization, new
yeah,
experience. I never experienced that. That even me and my wife would have a different recommendation. Right? Or Starbucks, probably shifting focus from a product centric to an experience centric. It's, a lot of people would probably not say that it's the best coffee they've had, but they would still continue to go to Starbucks, because probably it's more about the whole ambience and the experience of going there. Again,
yeah,
Amazon is again the whole seamless, frictionless experience. Again, pivoting in on experience. Apple, we all know. The whole user experience. Uber, again, reframing. I would say the whole industry boundaries through experience innovation. So it's interesting that how, and would love to hear your views about that.
you're right.
Is CX being seen as that the drive in the new blue ocean strategy?
Yeah. So maybe, sorry, I'll just be a bit of a nerd here. So definitely, if you link all of your value just to physical item or a product like the coffee or the content that I stream online, I completely agree with you. There will be dozens of other companies that do it almost as good as you, a little better, a little worse, a little cheaper, a little. You put cosmetic touches, but it's effectively the same thing. I know I'm exaggerating, yeah, but
Hmm.
from an economic perspective, these are truly competing products. Most customers would choose A or B and pay more or less the same thing. And if they
Hmm.
choose A, they don't buy B. So they're competing in that regard. Um, when we talk about the blue ocean, we usually mention we are trying to avoid competition by targeting individuals who are not customers of the industry. And so I agree that customer experience in many cases attracts known customers. So you go and reach out to individuals who would never buy from you before.
Hmm.
Um, but it's even more than that. So what I wanted to say is
Hmm.
I think that you really spot on the importance of customer experience to say yes, it untaps blue oceans, but also creates new ways
New
to
ways.
stand out in a red ocean, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, the physical item, the physical product, or the let's say what we would call a functional value created by a product, that's very easy to replace and replicate.
Hmm.
There are layers upon layers of value that you need to build to capture and lock in a customer and keep them coming back. And these come from across the experience, the journey of the customer, and also some social dimensions of the customer, the way you build an entire business model around the customer, the way you
Right.
lock them in with payments. I'll give you this for free because I can charge you more on that. So there are very complex dynamics there. But I'm 100% with you. The product makes no money anymore. You don't stand out anymore, except in some extremely refined, super premium, artisanal, handcrafted experiences, uh,
Hmm.
which nonetheless have additional meanings, right? Because
Hmm.
if you put in front of me two very good dinners of sushi, one which was handcrafted by a master sushi master, and another one by just an average chef, I'm not sure I could tell the difference.
Hmm.
But if you put the sushi master into a small restaurant where only 8 people are allowed. It's very expensive. No one is allowed to say a word. I had to fight in order to get that reservation. You put all of that. Now suddenly, even I
Hmm.
appreciate that sushi much better, even
Hmm.
though I'm not sophisticated enough in terms of my taste. So I agree with you. I mean, eventually, even an extraordinary sushi can really be perceived as being extraordinary by many customers only within a richer customer experience, physical or digital, as you said very well.
Interesting, because another opposite example which I've seen is some of the musicians have done this social experiment that probably their shows would get sold out, and the social experiment they did was, they changed their, the facial, they'll put on a beard,
Yeah,
new hair and everything, and sit in the subway and play the same music. People would just walk by, they'll not
yeah.
even
So
stop.
who's this? Who's this drunk? Or
Who's this person? Yeah. But they would pay, probably $500 to go and,
yeah,
hear the same person in live concert. So I think, yeah, that,
I agree. And that's really, as you said from the beginning, it's a perception of the experience, the perception of value. Uh,
hmm,
and if the only thing that, I mean, let me be very very clear here. I mean, I don't want to mislead anyone. The quality of the product has to be there.
right,
It's non-negotiable. That's a
right,
condition that's necessary, but it's surely not sufficient in order to win nowadays.
right.
So
Even in branding 101, if I recall from, from my B school days, I mean, they used to tell that to achieve brand loyalty, you need to first ace on the functionality. You
yeah,
have to be number one in functionality, like probably how Mercedes did all the crash testing initially to just prove that it's the safest car in the world.
yeah,
Probably Ray-Ban, I mean, in the initial advertisement, they used to have pilots, soldiers. I mean, people who are there in those
yeah,
extreme conditions wear Ray-Ban because they're trying to establish their superiority on functional. And it was then later that they get onto that emotional connection, that once they have, you have to have superior functional or functional superiority, and then build
agreed.
emotional connect, where you get in all your Hollywood stars, come in and wearing those Ray Bans, and that's where, or probably connect on a social cause, or something else, which then adds on and then builds that brand loyalty, which, like, let's say, companies like Apple, it's not worth $1,000 for that phone. You will probably get the same features, functionality in 50% less price, but you'll still go and pay that price.
Agreed. Listen, I I said I was going to mention it earlier. I said I was going to mention it. I really want to say it now, if that's all right with you. There are many alternative MBAs out there. There
Hmm.
are alternatives to what my company does. Right? You can get business education of a very good level. I would say for free. If it's not for free, it's very cheap, but probably you can get it for free. And you can get also the validation of someone who has some expertise, who says not only this is free, but this is also what you need to know. So they tell you this is what you really need to know. So you have the feeling of I'm reassured.
Hmm.
And yet it doesn't look to me like any of these companies have even taken one bit away out of the attractiveness and desirability of you know famous higher education institutions. Um, and I've heard someone describe higher education institution with some reputation as the ultimate luxury brand,
Hmm.
because the cost of providing this high quality executive education or education in general is not that high. I'll be very honest,
Hmm.
compared to how much they generate. So if you think of the most expensive educational experience that I know of is the executive MBA at Wharton,
Hmm.
where participants pay about $700 per contact hour with a professor, which means contact hours means that they are sat down in a room with 80 other students easily, maybe more. And each one of them is paying $700 to be sitting there listening to one guy talking. Now, this guy must be really, really good.
Hmm.
I'm sure he's really well paid, but nowhere near what he generate. He doesn't get paid in a year what he generates in 1 hour of revenues.
Right.
Maybe he does, but I'm just throwing numbers there, right?
Hmm.
So the cost of the content, the value, if you wish, the functional value, which is the professor talking, cost wise is close to nil. And it's the
Hmm.
same as a luxury brand. So of course you want to have the best leather or the best
Hmm.
gems and diamonds, but the cost of that raw material or like functional component is negligible compared to the cost of everything you do, and especially to the revenues you generate. And so the companies that manage to do that are luxury brands, where the brand of the school or the brand of the jewel maker or the bag maker, the brand is what adds and multiplies the raw materials into massive multiples of
Hmm.
revenues. Then schools, higher education, then they build campuses, they have very nice real estate facilities and so on. But again, that's not enough. You need to have it,
Hmm.
but that's not enough. That's not why students pay massive fees to go to Harvard. It's not for the building. It's not for
Hmm.
the
Right.
swimming pool, right? It's for something else. And so I think that there are some companies, and my industry is like that nowadays, where even though you can have a good functional replacement elsewhere, nonetheless the status acquired by being associated with a brand still cannot be eliminated.
Interesting. And if I talk about, because we're talking about luxury brands, and because I mean, if I go back, so my wife had opened a, we had opened a bakery in where we live in India, in Gurgaon, where we opened a French patisserie. So she used to specialize in macaroons. Now it's a very niche specialized product.
Yeah.
In India back in the day, it wasn't really popular. But if we knew that if we have to, I mean, on functionality, like I was saying, whoever tasted, because I remember while we were in London, in Paris, uh, we went to the Eiffel Tower. We made videos of people, more like a tasting experience, that if people in Paris feel that it's a great macaroon, it's a validation for us,
Yeah.
but it's a great marketing content as well, because then we're getting it from the source, from
Yeah.
where they originated. But we knew that if you have to take it to the next level, building that whole, removing the whole price elasticity, because it is, end of the day, is a slightly expensive product.
Hmm.
We need to have probably deep pockets, either
Hmm.
either to market it in a certain way, or let's say open 10 outlets in 10 malls, so that that perception comes in, or get a celebrity. And that's how, I mean, again, my perception, understanding is that that's how things were. Probably that, you have to take it to that emotional level, remove that price elasticity, you have to have deep pockets, and build, take it to that level. But now, do you think with the whole Netflix, Uber, where they're disrupting the whole space with CX, now CX probably could become that differentiator in terms of getting you that, or coming out
Yeah.
of that price elasticity, that I know this, probably Uber is expensive, let's say, than another local app. I would still pay Uber because of the whole
Yeah.
experience, seamless experience. Do you think that that probably
But
would shift the
yeah,
dynamics a bit for new companies coming up?
I think that it's increasingly more important because customers are getting spoiled, if you want to use this
Right.
word, or they're getting used to extremely high quality customer experience for sure. And so the expectations across industries are changing, including the industries that I'm familiar with.
Mm.
Including gas stations, even servicing gas stations. The expectations are changing. The shopping experience in the mini market in a gas station is now unreasonable
Hmm.
compared to what it was. I mean, 5 years ago, anyone who expected to have a premium specialty coffee made fresh without having to wait at a gas
At a
station,
gas
you
station.
think, you say, I mean, man, you're unreasonable.
Yeah.
But now it's taken for granted. You don't even win because of that anymore. You just play the game because everyone is doing it. So, I mean, that's happening there. Uh, so definitely, you need to raise your game that way. Uh, I'm I'm inclined to saying that there are maybe three elements. One of them is the customer experience is necessary,
Hmm.
and maybe it helps you keep your customers over time. I think that one of the pain points we see, especially with relatively younger businesses or businesses that scale rapidly, is that operations don't scale quite as quickly, maintaining the quality, because that's a different business. You know, doing one product and being really good at something and creating an organization that can do that product, they are not even remotely the same thing.
Hmm.
So you can be an extremely talented baker,
Hmm.
but it doesn't mean that you are able to manage a bakery or a team of bakers that deliver at your same level of quality,
Right.
just faster and bigger.
At scale.
So I think that scaling there
Hmm.
is really a little bit trickier. And the third thing is it's easier to get a lot of attention quickly than it was before.
Hmm.
It's harder to retain this attention. There's always the flavor of the month, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, maybe I love macarons this week, but next week there are, cookie dough croissant that are smashed and
Yeah.
dipped in chocolate, and say, "Oh, I have to have that." And and sometimes the replacement doesn't come from a direct competitor. Like this would be an example of direct competitor, but maybe the next example is in a beverage or a tattoo, or something where disposable income goes,
Right.
and then it's reflected in social media. So I think that you need to leverage your customer experience to give them even more. You give your customers even more to avoid them being taken away by the next fad.
Hmm.
So I think that these three elements: great customer experience, the ability to scale operations, and the ability to retain and keep delivering something new, um, all of them come together, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, probably the third one in my view is the most challenging part. That how do you keep up with it continuously?
Yeah,
Because people's attention span is also reducing. I mean, thanks to Instagram of the world. I mean,
yeah,
it's the attention. I mean, especially I'm sure with the younger generation, Gen Alphas, they're probably their bullshit parameter is just 2 seconds. I mean,
yeah.
they know if it's
Completely.
genuine or if it's just an ad. I mean, it's just a swipe for them.
I used to say that that in my educational job, I still used to teach bachelors until COVID or so. So back then, I used to say that my competitor is YouTube for attention. So I need
Right.
to deliver exciting content at the speed of a YouTube video to young minds who don't know a lot, and I found that increasingly challenging. Now, I stopped teaching bachelors after COVID, and I'm terrified at the idea of teaching them because I don't know if I can teach them anymore. Because now I compete with TikTok, as you say. So TikTok delivers snappy,
Yeah.
exciting content. Getting someone to listen to you for 80, 90 minutes on any topic, it's incredibly challenging. So I
Right.
respect my colleagues who successfully do that.
I'm sure I never thought about that. I'm sure it's a nightmare for professors
For them,
now
yeah.
to compete with. Yeah. But it's again an interesting example you spoke about because your competition is not what you think it is. It is probably somewhere
Hmm.
else. Because even from a customer standpoint, let's say if I'm a customer, I use my banking app, food ordering app, Uber app, social media app, all in the same hour. So my
Yeah,
expectation from a banking app is no different from an Amazon. I mean,
absolutely.
so why I have to do 10 clicks just to do one thing?
Yeah.
So I think so it's very challenging for, I mean, some of the stalwarts in the industry to change their perception. No, banking can be done differently, or or let's say a food delivery is not just food delivery. It's whole together a different experience.
I completely support what you just
Yeah.
said. The, the level of expectations of your customer and how they feel why they do things. is absolutely uncomparable to the way it was.
Mm.
And I think that I travel a lot, so I see that this happens at different paces in different countries. So I was telling you earlier, I'm back from 4 weeks on the road. I think I've done 9 international trips, or 10, whatever, in the last 4 weeks. So I've been to India, I've been to Hong Kong, I've been to Europe a couple of times, different places. I've been to a couple of places in the Middle East, and what you see is that each one of them has a slightly different way of doing these things, and it's
Mm.
slightly more advanced somewhere rather than other places. And I'll be honest, I think I've been to relatively advanced economies anyway. So we don't have yet a full convergence,
Mm.
but maybe there will be. So, for example, in the Middle East, you don't really have yet the super app that you might have in Singapore or Hong Kong, and
Right.
India is going stronger. In Europe, I can't say that I've seen anything coming close to a super app, and
So do you see it as a
and even
CX arbitrage that you can, quickly take it as an opportunity, or it's more to do with challenges, let's say, or certain
yeah.
things, a country has to offer in terms of tech, in terms of the whole, consumer mindset
Mm.
or demographic.
There might be a little bit of legacy as well. So, which apps successfully emerge at different points in time, and so
Mm.
different generations got used to them. So there is always a little bit of a cost when you abandon a platform and you move to a different one,
Hmm.
and you need to learn how to use it and familiarize with it and provide them with data and so on. So I think that there's a little bit of that path dependence, as we would call it in academia, and. Yeah, and then there are the uniqueness. I think that each country is unique because each well, we don't even have a customer that's representative of India or Hong Kong anymore. I think that there are groups or
Yeah.
niches increasingly. But then again, I mean, you, the groups that you have in tier one and tier two cities in India would be different than the groups you have in Hong Kong or in Paris, and so there is still a local flavor. I would
Hmm.
say, yeah,
But that also is changing, because I mean, if you look at the whole, one of the
yeah,
global mega trends, it's, the whole, the demographics are changing, so countries are no longer divided by borders. I mean,
no,
like in Italy, it's, the
yeah,
native Italians that, like, you taught us about that, it's a declining population, so they're going to be
very
immigrants
rapidly, yeah.
going to come in. So the demographic mix right now versus 10 years ahead is going to be very different. So
Agreed, agreed, and I think that if you factor in more immigrants coming from less technologically advanced countries
hmm.
like sub-Saharan African countries, I would think what you would probably see there is that those markets have rapidly developed by leapfrogging generations of technology. So if you go to, I don't know, if you go to Nigeria, everyone has a smartphone, even though almost nobody had a laptop.
Hmm.
Whereas if you go to Paris, at some point everybody had a desktop computer, then they transitioned to the laptop, then they transitioned to the smartphone, and so there is also a legacy in the type of systems and solutions that they've gotten
Hmm.
used to. Whereas, in countries where this was not possible or it didn't exist, they very rapidly jumped into the a more advanced use of smartphones. And so when these populations merge, the solutions that they will need because they live in proximity and they have common services, they will have to either to
Hmm.
strike a new balance or to change and innovate. I'm
Hmm.
thinking about Europe mostly because it's a continent I'm a bit more familiar with. Um, but I mean, if you can probably think of similar things in the U.S.
Hmm.
If the Mexicans have certain apps that they use, and then many of them immigrate to the U.S. Now suddenly the platforms and solutions that prevail in the U.S. will be more Mexican, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Right.
Uh, right. So that these are big dynamics. I never thought about them, to be honest, but now that you mentioned it, it was
Yeah,
these are the first reflections that came to mind.
because the expectation will be different. Because, for example, in India, now the expectation is that anything you want to order, any grocery, will come in less than 10 minutes. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what everybody's advertising. I mean, although medicines may take longer to come, but grocery will come within less than 10
Yeah.
minutes. Now, when we go to US, it's a very different mindset. It's like I have to book one day in advance if I want to have a delivery tomorrow. How does it even work?
Yeah.
So, but but the consumers in US, they are very much used to it because they've
Totally.
been conditioned like that. I mean, for them it's like you're still getting it at your door place, you should be happy about it. I mean, so
No,
yeah.
no, I completely, that resonates completely. It's an experience I've had, and between, a very good friend and colleague of mine talks about Dubai, and he said where he lives as well, and I live in Abu Dhabi, but I spend a lot of time in Dubai for work. Uh, he calls Dubai as life as a service because everything you need for your life is is in an app. And
I mean,
I remember there
yeah.
were periods of time when I used to live in Italy and travel still to Dubai quite frequently. And I would stay in Airbnbs, usually in the same building. There's
Hmm.
a big tower, so there's plenty of options there. And I remember that I had this routine, like as soon as I landed and my phone connected to the 4G, I would immediately order groceries and dinner. So by the time I got home, my groceries and my dinner were waiting for me on my doorstep. So I would just come inside and have dinner.
Hmm.
Uh, and then often I would go and collect the laundry or get it delivered that I left there the week before.
Yeah.
So everything was super taken care of by someone else. It was completely outsourced.
Also, another, I have an interesting story as well. So one of our friends, she came in from US, and in India we love drinking tea. I mean, tea is
Yeah,
probably our national drink. So we're just making tea, and we typically would put ginger in the tea as well while making it. So we like, do you want ginger? She's like, yeah, sure. And we didn't have ginger at home, so she's like, oh, it's okay, don't worry. Let's not put. Like, it's okay. I mean, while we were making the tea, we ordered ginger. It arrived in 5 minutes. We just put it in the tea, and she was blown away. She's like, what just happened? She's like, you guys cannot move to US, you cannot live there now, with you're so spoiled with this that you can't really move to US anymore now.
yes.
I was like, yeah, it's, if not like this,
No, no, but that
how
makes
else?
sense.
But I mean, talking about the future of CX, I mean, one dimension is, yes, we're talking about the whole changing customer expectation,
Mm,
change in demographic, but then there's also a rapid change in tech. I mean,
yeah,
everybody's talking about AI. So how do you think that the whole I mean, yes, I think the talk is this much right now. Probably the use cases probably have seen very little less, but
yeah,
the promise is huge because now people can see the actual use cases on their hand. I can, I have Chat GPT on my phone. I can see the use case. It's not like I have to wait for a brand to implement something like a automated self-driven car and probably then see one on the road and say,
yeah,
"Oh, I see," tech innovation. So, how do you see that role of AI shaping the whole
yeah.
future of CX?
Listen, I'll mention maybe a couple of things. One is a very minor thing, but I'm really excited about it. It's minor in the context of what we're discussing, but I'm really excited. It's so generative AI and AI in general in my profession is still relatively new.
Mm,
But I want to say my business school just signed a deal, an agreement with OpenAI. So we have a special relationship to understand how students and executive education participants learn and use generative AI in their learning processes. And so we're really, really focused on understanding how can we upgrade the
mm,
experience of being a learner, leveraging this technology, ensuring the level of quality and responsiveness and so on that a brand like a business school wants to put
mm,
there. So in a way, the answer to the first part of the question, so besides this example, is we don't know because we're really trying hard now.
mm,
But a couple of things we do know. One of them, you already mentioned it, with the speed of service. A few years ago, I think that Amazon said, we want to make logistics more like utility. And
mm,
what they meant is, if you want electricity, it's already there. Yeah, you just press the switch and the light appears because the electricity was just waiting for you. Or water, right? You open the
mm,
tap, water starts running because the water was already there. So we want to do the same thing with logistics. If you want this weather, you click on the button. This weather is already waiting outside of your door.
mm,
Now, maybe that's an exaggeration, right? In a way, uh, but within a few minutes, right? As you said,
mm,
I think that here there are at least two major components that have to come together. So the Amazon approach is truly tech driven. So they have massive data models predicting
mm,
that within a certain 15 minutes interval in the day of tomorrow, two people in your block will order a sweater of such model. And so they already move it in a warehouse close to you.
Hmm.
so that by the time you start searching for it, they predict what's the probability that you are going to order it specifically, and they can
Correct.
send it to you while you are still, making the final decisions. But Amazon might know already which color you end up choosing, and they might even send you two different colors because maybe you make your decision um, while the goods are already being sent over to you,
Hmm.
and then whatever you don't buy gets brought back to the warehouse. So
Hmm.
that's already being rolled out. So Amazon Prime is designed a little bit like that. They can't do it on every product,
Hmm.
but for quick deliveries of fresh produce and so on, it's a bit like that. The second one is which you have in India, and I think it's a version we have also in the Middle East. It's a bit labor intensive, and it's
Hmm.
based on the fact that there is also affordable labor, and so the cost of providing it by brute force of having people delivering rather than anticipating
Hmm.
is competitive enough that we can do it. Eventually, there probably will be a convergence of these two.
Hmm.
I expect. The second element that I expect more of from tech is, and it's there, but I don't think that it's being incorporated as much. Is that instead of you saying I want ginger, so you come up with the idea that you want ginger, and you go and you look for ginger specifically. Uh, the protocols of generative AI are changing the way we do searches.
Hmm.
So instead of looking for specific items or products or solutions, we tend to look more for end to end journeys. So maybe instead of you saying I want ginger, the next thing will be I'm having tea with people visiting from the US or
Hmm.
from an old friend with Indian heritage but who has spent many years in the US lately. And
Hmm.
you could get an offering that may or may not include ginger based on a number of other factors so that the experience of having a guest will
Hmm.
be wow, right? So that's a little bit the direction I anticipate. So just to recap, number one
Hmm.
is there is tech and workforce that can make these services extremely fast. Tech still has some way to go.
Yeah.
Uh, the two of them, I think, are the future. In terms of recommendations, so to speak, so there will be less searches coming from the customers and more recommendations coming from the technology. And they
Anticipating those
recommend
purchases. Yeah.
exactly, and probably also building some sort of combined offering, saying, "Well, I'll get you ginger from the store the local
Hmm.
veggie store downstairs, but I will also bring you specialty macarons from
Yeah.
well, your wife's bakery. Probably you wouldn't need to
Hmm.
order, but so they can pool these orders together to create a unique experience specifically for different users, and probably they can also optimize cost and prices at the same time. So
Hmm.
depending on your usual spending level, they might recommend macarons or they might recommend more basic cookies, and all of this will come from data. These
Yeah.
are probably the two things that come to mind. So on the back end and on the front end, so to speak, that's
Yeah,
my
and that
guess.
where you say the both tech and the workforce has to meet, come in the middle and meet. I think with this, it'll make it more business a viable business model as well,
Yeah,
because now the average order value would also increase. It's not just a ginger, for which somebody's coming in to deliver. It's five other
yeah,
things. So it's the whole experience.
indeed. And I think the majority of these platforms are still burning through cash. I
I'm
don't
sure.
really
Yeah.
know any of them that's making money. So yeah.
But I mean, just coming to my last point, topic, because I mean, we're talking about future, we're talking about AI, but then I think everybody also realized that there has to be a balance between AI and human touch.
Hmm.
You can't really leave everything to AI, and there has to be an element of human touch. Now, it could be different from Gen Alphas, Gen Zs, and probably
Yeah.
millennials or baby boomers, but then there has to be an element of human touch. I mean, back in the day, probably airlines, maybe not back in the day, even today, for example, I really like that whole idea that the whole, I mean, if you've taken express flight, there are counters and there where you do your check-in yourself, but if you're stuck somewhere, there is somebody who's there who can help you. So that
Hmm.
human element is there, it's an option, but you can do it faster with the system, so you are self independent and you can do it. So again,
Yeah.
It's not just a system dependent that there's nobody out there, because I remember last to last we had gone to Vegas. We stayed in this Hotel Flamingo.
Mm.
I mean, so many number of rooms, and there are 10 self checkout, those
Counter.
kiosks
Yeah.
out there, and not one person. There was just one person at the counter, but then there's those self check-in kiosk. Out of those 10, probably 7 8 of them were not working, and
Oh,
it was very frustrating to stand in the line and then figure out it's not working. And then I realized, oh, again I have to go back to that queue where everybody is standing, because there's just one
mm.
person. So probably they did not manage that thing whole well. But you still
Yeah, I get
need
it.
that human touch. I mean, if like, I'm pretty sure to 20 years down the line they'll not even have that one person sitting there. It's all going to be automated. You just probably use your app, go in and open the door, and go to the room. So how do we balance
Yeah.
between the whole AI and human touch? Or
Yeah.
how
So
important?
human touch, I think, is key for someone like me. Especially when it's thoughtful and
Hmm.
it's genuine. Uh, I think it will be increasingly one of the differentiators of luxurious experiences or top end experiences. The fact that there is a human touch doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a person physically present, but
Hmm.
someone who has an awareness beyond that of an AI. At least in today's level of development of the technology,
Right.
the awareness of an AI is not great. Um, and and also, I mean, some of the services that are provided are not genuinely AI. It's just a bot that does
Hmm.
fairly standardized automation. So
Yeah.
one of the anecdotes I can share with you, and I don't know if it works for everyone, but I think you should try it. Um, I had issues with my bank, and I was trying to with my credit card specifically, and I was trying to solve a problem with the credit card, and I called the call center a number of times, and it turns out to be a very painful experience
Hmm.
until someone gave me a tip. Um, and and the tip is when you start talking, say, I need to report a fraud. So that when you say the word fraud, there
Hmm.
immediately red flags start
Hmm.
appearing. And so immediately someone picks up and talks to you. So there are some channels to fast track that.
Hmm.
So I started doing it for every service I need. Even if it's not fraud,
Hmm.
I still do it because I want that service that you're describing. Now, that service, the fact that you get some sort of human touch
Hmm.
today means that there has to be a human, and this human must be smarter and better than the machine. The machine can help the human. Yeah, you can do a pre-search, a pre-filtering, a number of things, but the ultimate decision making, I think, should come from a human being.
Hmm.
That's my preference. I also suspect, as you said, that in a few years this person will not be there.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, I think that for many of the tasks for which a person would be there today, I suspect that the automated system will be better than the human. So you may want to pay for the human just because it's part of the overall customer experience, but not for the functional component only. Functional component, I think the machine will be better.
Hmm.
So what you describe, I'm thinking as I answer,
Hmm.
right? So if I go to an airport and I go and do the check-in, manual check-in or physical check-in, the experience is definitely more pleasant for me,
Hmm.
but it takes a much longer time than if I do self check-in. And probably the optimum is to have, as you said, a human being
Hmm.
who helps me do the self check-in. That's the strikes a perfect balance
Balance.
between extremely fast service with a pleasant interaction.
Hmm.
Um, so it is a middle ground,
Hmm.
but I'm not very optimistic about how long this will last. I'll be very honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially as Gen Alphas grow up. So
Yeah,
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 because interesting. One of my previous guests said that I'm the question I had was asked was that would AI replace humans? At the workforce.
yeah.
But he's very interesting thing he said was that as long as there's a human validating the output of AI, if it's
Mm.
good or not, it's not going to replace. So I see, I don't foresee it happening anytime in near
It's
future.
an
But
interesting
yes,
point.
yeah.
There is this. It's called Moravec paradox, and it says AI, at least machine learning, more specifically, is much better suited to replace a white collar worker than a blue collar worker.
Hmm.
Machine learning is better at doing high order cognition rather than complex manual tasks.
Hmm.
So I don't think that we are really thinking this through, but
Mm,
AI is more likely to eventually replace a lot of people like you and me,
mm,
rather than a lot of people like
mm.
those who make our meals, or the, the drivers and the janitors and so on. There will still be a lot of needs, or
Yeah,
factory workers.
yeah,
Uh, I don't have a forecast here. I'm
yeah,
just saying it's one thing that we never really consider when we
yeah.
say AI takes people's jobs, because it's people like you and me who makes these decisions. We would rather replace the jobs of the blue collars, but
Right.
that's not necessarily where the technology excels.
Yeah, we wanted automation to happen in cleaning, cooking, and not in designing, creating content. So it
Exactly,
happened the
but
other way around. Yeah,
yeah, but AI is better at designing and creating content than cleaning.
yeah. No, great. Thank you so much, Alessandro. I mean, this was great conversation. I loved it, and I'm sure all the listeners, would find it very insightful as well. So thank you so much
Thank
for taking
you.
your time. I know you've been traveling for last 4 weeks, and then Monday morning we have the podcast. So again, thank you, really, a part of my
Thank you
heart.
so
Thank you.
much, and I just want to say hi to everyone and thank them for listening to me and my my reflections. If anybody feels like following up or on anything or being in touch, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's usually the best channel. I'm not very fast at responding, but
Yeah.
it's the best channel to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks.